Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. It means a lot to me when I see people tuning in and sharing this podcast with their friends. For those that are just joining us this week, I want to give you a warm welcome to the exchange. I truly value the new thought and energy, and I hope you continue to join us in the future. You listeners are the most important part of this podcast, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Please remember that if you have any suggestions for topics or guests, I do listen to the listeners, and I look forward to hearing from you either from our website or you can contact me at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. Before I forget and I don't address it at all, there are some video issues for those of you that are watching on YouTube or Spotify. Apparently, ZenCastr couldn't work with the mobile browsers, and as some of you may already know, I've never made it through a Zoom recording without having some sort of issue. That said, Nick was using a still image anyway, so you wouldn't notice it much on his video, but some of mine will have our Awaken Exchanges logo imposed right over here, so you don't see the glitches in the matrix quite as much. I appreciate you bearing with me. I do hope to prioritize a new laptop and or camera in the near future, assuming that's the problem and not the software, but I digress. Anyway, that said, I hope you're as excited to be here as I was to record this incredible episode. Today, we welcome back one of my favorite guests, the conspiracy guru himself, Nick Hinton. Nick first joined us back in December of 2020 on a holiday episode, and we finally got our timing aligned again, just in time to record a very special 50th episode of Awakened Exchanges. I still can't believe we're here for 50 episodes already. Wow. We talk about his literal journey that he's taken back and forth across America over these last couple of years, as well as his metaphorical journeys into conspiracy theory. We're going to take a look into his two newest books and a couple of off-the-wall conspiracy theories I'd never even heard of before. It's a fun ride, and I think you're going to enjoy it. All right, one quick thing. There are a lot of overlapping holidays right now, as well as a huge portion of people out there that don't believe in them at all. No matter what your preferences or beliefs, I want to truly wish you a time of peace and goodwill towards all. If we all focused on that even half as much as whatever political turmoil or civil unrest we individually choose to obsess over, then I think maybe the world would start looking a little less like we're headed towards an apocalyptic dystopia and more like the vision Gene Roddenberry, say, had in Star Trek. Even Nick talks a little bit about how Roddenberry might have been influenced by the Council of Nine channelings by Phyllis Schlemmer. And either way, moving towards a society that is more about cooperation and understanding seems like the way to go to me. I'll continue to wish that Dharma for all of us out there. And now, before we get into Nick's journeys, I want to thank each of you personally for your support. Just listening and sharing this podcast with your friends keeps giving me a reason to provide the best content that I can. If you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please take a look at our Patreon page where you're going to get access to exclusive content and deals. Your personal support there and at Awaken Vapes are pretty much the only means of funding this podcast, so I truly hope you all know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. As for our other sponsors, Awaken Vapes was the first of the Awaken brands and has been helping you modulate your high with CBD-only, high-terpene vape products since 2019. Magic Mind, a magical combination of ingredients designed to help you improve your energy, focus, and productivity. And Genesis Pharms is, of course, still making the highest quality medicinal RSO among many other fantastic products. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us wherever else you're listening. And if you can, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. I know every podcast says that, but it really does help visibility. So you can support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now, stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges.
still can't say enough about Magic Mind. They have been nothing but generous and kind since reaching out to us, and when you add good people to a great product, you're certain to have a winning combination. Magic Mind has designed the world's first productivity drink, a morning ritual built to help the creative workers of the 21st century. Magic Mind's science-backed blend of matcha, nootropics, and adaptogens work together to get you into that flow state faster, all without the anxiety or jitters that can come with caffeine. All you get is the focus and productivity. So what else could you ask for? Well, visit magicmind.co/awake today and learn more about what this elixir can do for you. Better yet, use the promo code AWAKE20, that's AWAKE20, and get a total of 40% off your first order with that discount code. That comes to about $3 per bottle to help bring unbeatable focus and clarity to your life every single day. Next, we have Genesis Pharms. Founded on the belief in cannabis's ability to heal, Genesis Pharms is more than a brand. They're a compassionate community of like-minded folks that bring top-quality cannabis products made with love and care. You can find their products on the best dispensary shelves across the state of Oregon. Their RSO is the highest, most consistent quality in the state. Their tinctures are second to none, and their personal massage oil will have you and your partner coming back for more. Double entendre intended? Possibly. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram and ask for them in your local dispensary today. You can even learn more about Genesis Pharms by listening to Sean on our very own Awaken Exchanges episode number 3. That brings us to Awaken Vapes, bringing you the highest quality CBD vape cartridges since ringing in the new year back in 2019. I became passionate about cannabis after a car wreck left me with major migraines, and Western medicine had failed to alleviate the symptoms. After about 2 years, a very compassionate doctor decided to ask me if I'd ever smoked cannabis. Having only tried cannabis a handful of times in high school and college, it was this off-the-cuff recommendation that made me realize the amazing health benefits that we've been missing out from this wonderful plant. Please visit www.awakenvapes.com today, where we still offer our 3 custom terpene formulations, but now with an enhanced flavor profile to go along with those original, powerful effects. And don't forget, you can always email us about any wholesaling or white labeling opportunities. Last but definitely not least, the absolute best way for you to help support this podcast would be by joining our Patreon page. There you're going to get access to exclusive content and amazing merch deals, and you truly are the most important part of this podcast. So joining in the exchange is the absolute best way to become a part of it. Thank you, and I hope to see you all again here in the future.
Welcome back to Awaken Exchanges. I'm incredibly excited to have Nick Hinton, the conspiracy guru himself, back on our show. Welcome, Nick.
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me again.
Thank you for joining us again. I normally ask people to introduce themselves a little for people that don't know them in our audience, but this is your second time on, and you're also incredibly well known in the conspiracy world. So let's try something a little bit different. How do you think people describe you to others when trying to introduce them to your ideas?
The conspiracy thread guy.
The conspiracy thread guy. Okay. Why is that?
Well, I mean, that's how I really started going viral and stuff, was just writing a ton of threads on conspiracy theories. And I feel like that was also towards the beginning of people really starting to use threads in general to explain like just longer formatted ideas on Twitter, because that was like when that feature first became available. And I actually saw a girl do a thread before threads were super popular. She did this thread about did the world end in 2012, and then I couldn't find it anymore and it disappeared. So I literally decided to write my own version of it and add some things about CERN and black holes and whatever. And then because I was fascinated by the idea when I first read it.
Yeah.
And I looked into it for myself. And then, I think it was like only a year later where I just tried looking for it again because I wanted to read through it again, and it just disappeared. So I rewrote it, in my own words and added some things, and then that blew the hell up. And yeah, that's basically what happened.
So it went from CERN and the world ending into the Saturn time cube was probably the first big one that I got to see from yours.
Yeah, so that was actually the first one I posted.
Oh, okay.
The 2012 one was more of just like a passion project. Like I did that for fun after the fact. So, but I wasn't like going super viral from the Saturn stuff. I mean, I did gain probably like 10, 20, 30,000 followers, but um after the 2012 thing, it just went crazy and never stopped growing, at least for like a couple of years. Um the Saturn stuff, yeah, I was in college at the time, and I was studying philosophy, so we were learning how to write essays, learning how to construct a real argument. So in my free time, I was like, I'm going to write an essay about something that I actually really care about a lot, and try and make an argument for it, like a philosophical argument. And I posted it to Reddit. It went viral there. I saw Tinfoil Hat post about it. I was like, holy crap, this is gaining traction. So I decided to post it to Twitter in the form of a thread. And then, yeah, that's what got me my initial followers.
Very cool. So, is there something that you think people generally get wrong about you or what you're trying to do? Misconceptions they have?
Yeah, well, I think one of my biggest mistakes is wearing a 33 hat, to be honest with you. Because
okay, why is that?
particularly, I mean, I think some people out there more and more lately actually think I'm some kind of government shill because of my 33 hat, but just because people will say it's like a Masonic like signaler or something, which I mean it is, but not in my case. Like that, the whole reason I got that hat, like I got that personally made because at the time in my life I was experiencing a ton of synchronicities dealing with the number 33. And it just happened to be my favorite number. So I went and got a hat with the number embroidered on it. And the story behind that's super long. I don't know if we want to get into that.
Let's get into it. Let's hear it. Yeah, people
Okay.
love hearing from you, man.
Okay, well, I guess we'll get into the deep stuff right away. This story is kind of like really crazy, but
okay.
So it's kind of hard to believe, but I mean we're on the Awaken exchanges. So, anyways,
exactly.
when I was like maybe 19 or 20, I was kind of in like just a confusing place in my life. I didn't really know what the hell to believe anymore. I had delved into conspiracies at that point already, but I was like a big science person. I really believed in science, and I started to struggle with the idea of God. And so one day I decided to just open the Bible, and I just remember reading through the book of John, and John 1:1 says God created the world through his word, and God was the word. So I started wondering, like, what does that actually mean? And being like, not like a full Christian or anything, I was just experimenting with that idea. I was like, is this like a metaphor? Is this like something metaphysical? Does that mean that we can create worlds with words? Like if we're creating his image, like wouldn't we be able to create worlds with our words as well? So back when I was like 19 or 20, there wasn't hardly anything online about like words being magic spells or anything, at least not that I could find. So I decided to do my own experiment, where I decided to write a story about me writing a story. And in the story within a story, I wrote a letter to God, and I said, listen, God, I'm freaking pissed off. I don't know what's going on anymore. I need all the answers right now. So I was just demanding answers from him. I need to know if he was real. I need to know if, like, dude, I was studying so much stuff at the time. My brain was just exploding. I was like, is the Anunnaki real? Is the Planet X real? Is the Earth flat? Like, is there planets at all? I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyways, like a week or so later, I was working at a greenhouse at the time. As this lady there named Janice who would always ask me to interpret her dreams when we'd work together, just watering plants and stuff. And this particular day, though, I came in and she's like, hey, my roommate keeps having dreams about a person named Nick. And now, after I told her about you, she thinks they're about you. She originally thought they were about her son, but it just didn't feel totally right. But I told her about you. Now she thinks it's you and she wants to meet you. I'm like, okay. And so after work, we go back to her house together, and I meet Janice's roommate, and like she talks to me for a minute. She says she wants to pray for me. She puts oil over my head, and we talk for a little bit. And um, after all this is over, after she's like anoints me with oil, prays over me, does all this stuff, she hands me this folded up piece of paper, and she's like, "This is a letter from God." And I'm like, "What the hell?" It was already a little bit, it was already a little bit weird right there.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
but when I finally opened up the piece of paper, it said, "Read Jeremiah 3 through verse 33:3." And if you look at that verse, it says, "Call unto me, and I shall answer unto you all great and unsearchable things you do not know." And I was like, holy shit, like this is that was like my first major synchronicity in my life. And it was also like just the coolest thing ever. Like it was the most godly response ever. It was like God directly
Yeah.
responded to my question without answering anything at all, which I think is the most clever thing you could do. So I became obsessed with the number 33. I started seeing it everywhere all the time. I thought it was like this kind of like guiding number. And then I've posted this picture before back in the day, but yeah, I was inspired to go get that 33 hat. And when I bought it, it ironically added up to $33.11. And people are like, that's way too people are like, that's way too much fucking money for a hat, especially back then before inflation. And it was, but it was fucking lids, and you know how they are about prices.
Yeah.
So.
And when you have to actually get it specially embroidered, any of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, it costs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the story about the hat. And I do think that hat could have signaled some of the wrong people though. Like I wonder about that. Like if like if other weirdos out there may have thought like, oh, that is a Mason, and then they became friends with me for that reason. I don't know.
Shine that light on you, and not necessarily with the same intention you put it together with.
Yeah.
I see. Um, there was a when you said that letter from God thing, it made me think of. Have you heard of Neil Donald Walsh?
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't he have a book called like Letters to God or something like that?
It's along that line, and there's like I think 3 or 4 of them in the series. But it was interesting because he basically started it in a similar way. He started writing letters to God, and then basically was waiting for the answers, and it would kind of come to him. Not it sounds weird, but kind of like a little voice, that little voice inside his head, and he would be able to start writing back, and the responses he came up with didn't necessarily seem like his belief structure as much as an actual response. It was a fascinating little book, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't read it, but I do remember coming across it because I was searching, all over the internet for like answers to what the hell had just happened. I was like researching like, do stories come to life? Like, does fiction become reality? I started like obsessing over that idea, and I came across Letters from God. I also came across like Philip K. Dick and his speech. Have you heard that speech where he talks about how Flo, the tears the policeman cried? I think that's the name of the book. He wrote a book titled, either that was the title or something similar, but that he wrote a story that came to life. Long story short, at least he thought so. And then same thing with Edgar Allan Poe. That was the only 2 examples I could really find back then, at least, that were like, yeah, these authors experienced stories seemingly becoming reality.
I'd love to go into more on that the Philip K. Dick one. I know I've heard about it, but I don't know all the details. And he was a fascinating character. He was pretty like his Man in the High Castle. He wrote that and talked about that as if that timeline, that reality actually existed, and he was just basically translating it down into a book form for people. And then it brings up things like, multiple timelines, the multiverse, things like that. Was he just getting glimpses into these kind of places, and how much the crossover is?
Right. Yeah. He believed he was tapping into tangent realities or something like that, I believe he said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
But I'll try and explain what happened to him the best I can. I don't know it verbatim, but
Oh, of course.
basically he had written this story where this guy was running from the police or something, and he asked someone for help. I really forget the details at this point, but long story short, he ends up going to a pastor to talk about his story, and the pastor is like kind of pissed off. He's like, you just rewrote the book of Acts. Like, it was a story straight out of the book of Acts, except just like a modernized version. And then like a year or so later, he realized while at the gas station helping this guy that it was the same exact situation that he had written about in his book. I'll provide a link or something. He gives a whole speech about it. It's really interesting. I just can't bring it all up verbatim.
Yeah, no worries. I'll grab that link from you later and include it in the show notes. That'll work out well. But you've had a pretty interesting year yourself this year. A little all over the place, right?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly when we talked last. Like, how many was it, a year ago, 2 years ago, or?
It was like November of 2020, I think. So almost 2 years ago now, yeah. Or
Yeah.
just over.
Yeah, so November 2020. Wow, yeah, it's been a long, long time. So in 2021, I started traveling all over the country and meeting people that I just met through Twitter. One of them being Ryan Bledsoe, and he introduced me to his family. His dad is famous for being abducted within the UFO community. So I went to his property. I saw some things there. I ended up going back home for a bit, and then traveling to Florida to meet a person that was also having UFO experiences. And then I started writing this book, and I started writing Stairway to Sirius after those experiences with Ryan and this girl from Florida. And probably, I think it was the summer afterwards, I decided, the book was just way too hard to finish, and it was just causing me all sorts of problems. Like, I was depressed. I was having horrible dreams. I couldn't leave bed some days. And so I just got really, really fed up and decided to just drive across the country and clear my head. So I ended up driving all the way from Cleveland. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I literally woke up really pissed off one day and threw a bunch of dirty baskets of laundry into the back seat of my car, a couple books, a backpack of toiletries, and just started driving from Cleveland all the way to Los Angeles.
Dang, that's quite a drive.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, especially through the Utah desert. That was probably, and the mountains of Colorado. Like, it was beautiful, but also terrifying being all by yourself.
Yeah, not having driven through those areas before. What time of year was that? Because those mountains can be something else.
Yeah, so that was September. Or no, hold on. Or no, so it was October. I think I left October 14th. And so yeah, it was definitely cold in the mountains, and it was snowing just a little bit. Yeah, first time in the mountains was terrifying because my car was going like 25 miles an hour, and I stopped in this little shanty town, and I asked some mechanic. I was like, "Yo, dude, my car is like not driving." He's like, "Well, have you ever been in the mountains before?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "You drive an older car?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Just unscrew the gas tank for a half hour, you'll be fine." Because apparently the altitude messes with the oxidation or whatever in the gas tank.
Yeah,
Didn't know that.
Yeah, you wouldn't think about that.
So I sat there for 20 minutes, talked to the guy, and then yeah, everything was fine. I was on my way, and I serendipitously met up with my estranged Mormon family who lives in Denver.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. I hadn't talked to them in years, but they saw like my adventure on the Snapchat or Instagram or something, and they reached out to me, and they were like, "Hey, why don't you stop by? Like, we have the whole family over." And so got a place to crash, some breakfast and stuff. And it turned out that my cousin's like husband or something, he was a fan of mine. So like he came over, and we sat out in the backyard smoking cigarettes for like an hour, just talking about different theories, and that was really cool. Yeah, the whole thing was wild.
Sounds like a fun time. Where'd you go from Denver straight through to LA, or any stops along the way?
Yeah, so I stopped at a random hotel in the middle of the desert in Utah. That was interesting. Um, and then from there, I went like southwest through Las Vegas and then eventually, yeah, Los Angeles. And I stopped there for like 2 days
Okay.
and some kind of weird stuff happened there. I was actually with this one girl who wanted to take me to the Van Gogh Art Museum. And afterwards, we went to go get lunch. Okay, but before that, at the Van Gogh art exhibit thing, do you remember
Yeah.
that when they had the like the interactive thing?
Yeah. They
There's a home.
brought it up to Portland too.
Okay, yeah. So there was a homeless guy sitting outside of it, like painting, and
Okay.
I gave him the rest of the cash in my pocket for my favorite painting, and it was like this cityscape of LA. And he was like, "Thank you so much, man. Could I ask you one last favor?" And I was like, "Sure. What is it?" And he's like, "Can you add me on Instagram and send me a picture of my painting tomorrow? So like when I charge my phone, I can post it on my Instagram." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So the next day, me and that girl are getting lunch, and I send that dude that photo, and we're just like sitting at lunch talking about different theories and stuff. And I asked her how she found me, and she was like, "Oh, I found you through like the 2012, like did the world end in 2012 thread." So yeah, we were just talking about CERN and stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, the idea of CERN and blah blah blah, like it's pretty crazy to." We probably sound pretty crazy to all the people at this restaurant, listening to us because, not many people think about these types of things. And I was like, and like, imagine, especially a homeless person who doesn't have access to the internet or anything like that. Like, how are they supposed to know about stuff like this? And literally in that moment, the homeless guy who I sent his picture to, he messaged me out of nowhere and was just like, hey, man, I have this theory that the world ended in 2012 and Stephen Hawking was right. It was caused by CERN and blah, blah. He's just like this big long rant. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck is going on? So I was like, this is either an agent or like some kind of divine coincidence. But after that, I made my way to Fresno and lived with my friend Andre for a bit. And I lived there for about a month. And then I ended up going back down through Arizona and then stopped in Texas and El Paso for a bit and traveled to Jacksonville, Florida. And then after that, made my way back up to Ohio through the Carolinas and Georgia and stuff. And yeah, that took me a couple more days. So I left October 14th and I got back November 23rd, right
Wow.
before Thanksgiving. Right before Thanksgiving.
Sounds like a fun road trip, though.
Yeah. So this is actually like almost 1 year prior that I got home.
Okay, yeah. So a year after we talked, you've just done this road trip. Now we're here another year later.
Yes. But after I got done with the road trip, I only stayed home for a few months, ended up moving to Miami and Idaho for a month. Dude, there's so much crazy shit in between.
So Idaho was before. What happened there?
No, so after I got home from the road trip, I stayed home for a few months and then I took a train to Idaho and lived with my friend Maverick in the middle of the mountains in this like beautiful um like it was like all these different tree houses connected by bridges and stuff. Like it's pretty fucking cool. And he built it himself. And so I lived with him for a month and chopped some wood and ended up meeting up with another friend out there named Rich. I spent a few weeks at his house.
So let's start at the beginning. What made you decide to try Idaho?
Well, my friend Maverick Matthews lives out there. And
Okay.
it's really just as simple as that he invited me to come down and I thought to try it out.
Did you what made you decide to go ahead and leave other than the just couldn't take the mountain man life?
Yeah, I couldn't take the mountain man life. Like I thought that, I'd want to be that type of guy that gets away from society and everything, but I think it's just got to be even balance. I don't like the big city, but I also don't like absolute nothingness. I kind of like it in the middle where you still have community, but it's not such a dense community that it's just like a beehive where it's still just as isolating as the mountains, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in Portland right now, and yeah, I don't like to drive in the city. I don't like to be around half the people that are around here. It makes me want to find a real community, someplace, like you said, balanced.
Uh-huh. And then I ended up flying out of there to Louisiana in New Orleans. And then after that, I made my way to Florida. And I
Wow.
lived with Drew in Miami for a while, my friend Drew.
So then, what took you to Louisiana?
Well, so I had another friend living down there who had always asked me to visit. His name is Alessio. He works on films and stuff. And yeah, he had just always had the offer open. So when I realized I couldn't do the mountain life, I hit up Alessio and I was like, hey, um, I'm willing to take you up on that offer. Is it still available? And he's like, yeah, sure. I got a room for you. So I went down there for a few weeks and yeah, it's just Louisiana was just too crazy. I didn't like
Where in Louisiana?
like literally right by the French Quarter, like
Hmm.
right in
New
the middle of
Orleans.
everything. Yeah.
That's that's definitely a lot to take in, especially with somebody who's already sensitive to energy down there,
Yeah, and it was weird as hell. Like I was doing some writing down there on my new book, and I started the chapter all about the Moonchild ritual that Crowley talks about. And while I was down there, I realized that I was a few streets away from where Crowley had written his book Moonchild in 1917. And I was like, I just felt weird about that. I was like, dude, are these synchronicities? Like, because I was just following different kind of like when an opportunity presents itself to you, it can almost be kind of a synchronicity. So I felt like I was
Oh yeah.
almost being like dragged around the country and like by some kind of force that wasn't even necessarily myself. And I was like, I wanted to get the hell out of there. It felt spooky.
So then that took you to was it in the Miami area in Florida?
Yeah. So yeah. So I lived on South Beach.
Okay. And another friend take you that direction, or were you
Yeah,
following
that was my
anything for your book?
yeah, that was my friend Drew. And earlier that year we had actually already been down that way together. So yeah, this adventure starts in like 2021.
Okay.
There was a whole lot of other places I visited, but um yeah, so I had already been to South Beach with Drew before, and um the last time I was down there with him, he said, "Hey, we might have like a living situation set up later this year." So when I was in Louisiana trying to get out, I hit up Drew and I was like, "Hey, is that living situation opened up yet?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is. Like, I got the keys ready for you. Blah blah blah. So head down here and you can, stay." And yeah, I got down there. I was there for probably a week by myself, and then Drew ended up making his way down, and then yeah, we went on a whole bunch of adventures together, and some of the stuff did end up aligning with my book because I was writing all about the Georgia Guidestones and Jekyll Island and things like that. And we ended up taking a road trip from Miami to the Keys and up through the Guidestones and stuff like that. So yeah, it was all very synchronistic in hindsight.
And let's see, that was the book that you were working on, because I know you're working on a couple right now. You just released New World Disorder. Is that the one that you were working on down there?
No, so I've been working on this book called The Stairway to Sirius for some time now, since 2021 or maybe late 2020, honestly.
I think
So
that's
I've
the one
been
that you and I talked about and worked on the cover a little bit together back in the
yeah,
day.
exactly. Yes.
All right.
So I've been working on that since forever. And when I finally got home though, I decided that this Stairway to Sirius book was just freaking so big and so never ending that I didn't even want to touch it for a bit because too many things kept happening. I kept realizing too many different things in hindsight that I just needed to add to make it as perfect as I wanted it to be. So I decided to do the New World Disorder in the meantime. Yeah, so the name, the New World Disorder, comes from my idea that there's a kind of widespread disorder going on, not only COVID, I guess, but like this mind virus type situation where people are becoming increasingly crazy and splintered off into different reality tunnels, I guess, to use a phrase from Robert Anton Wilson, through all these different narratives and perspectives. And, it's just essentially possessing people to become kind of like schizophrenic, I guess. that's the best way I can put it. I mean, I call it the conspiracy mind virus because it's making people see connections between everything. Everyone's looking at numbers, everyone's chasing aliens, everyone's afraid of zombies and Nazis and all this different stuff. And honestly, outside of the internet, none of that stuff really matters. And that's kind of the conclusions that I'm coming to is, I've been so deep into the conspiracy rabbit hole for so long. I felt like I personally had been infected with some kind of sickness. Like it's an obsession and it's not good. And I think that in the days ahead, more and more people are going to be subjected to this type of like mindset. And it's okay to be there and it's okay to look into things, but it can cause an unhealthy obsession. And I think that what this book is for those days ahead and to teach people how to get back grounded into reality when things inevitably become stranger and stranger. And the New World Disorder is essentially the same kind of ideas, but it's more of a primer and it's more stuff that I learned after the fact. So yeah, I was working on Stairway to Sirius up until the road trip. And then after the road trip, I was inspired again. I felt refreshed. I did a lot more work on it. Got writer's block again. By the time I went to Idaho and then Miami, once I was in Florida, I did more work on it. But by the time I finally got home again, I had all these, I guess, really concise conclusions of what I wanted the Stairway to Sirius to be about. So I decided to just write that, and it flowed really, really easily, really, really fast. So I decided to turn that into a whole new book to serve as a primer for Stairway to Sirius, because Stairway to Sirius it's very informational, but it's there's a whole lot to it that's kind of more autobiographical, like about the adventure and what kind of synchronicities happened along the way that made me think to even look into certain ideas and topics, and things that happened along the way that helped me reach different conclusions. So people will see my mental process in the Stairway to Sirius, but they'll kind of understand more of like, I guess, the background information on some of these things from
the theories, the things they may not be familiar with.
Right. Yeah. So New World Disorder will be like more of the backstory of the theories I was looking into, because I didn't realize how deep some of this stuff went, because I was looking into, mind viruses and AI and the CIA's role in channeling aliens and Project Stargate and stuff like that. Like I was talking about all that, but I didn't learn about like the origins of those things until later on. And I decided to include all of the origin stories of these things in the New World Disorder to serve as kind of a primer.
I actually have to admit, I need to read the New World Disorder soon, because I am not up to date on the origins behind that and all the connections. As soon as you said Project Stargate, I knew my knowledge was too limited.
You're not familiar with Project Stargate?
I know of it, but I haven't dove deep on it yet. I've just been too busy and have only done the surface level. I know you've gone well into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. It's really dense stuff, and it's not the way that I really want to spend my time, because it gets really dark and weird really fast. But I mean, essentially, when you get into this stuff, you kind of start seeing how, it's not about space invaders, it's about mind control, and it's about psychotronics and stuff like that. So one of the things I talk about in the New World Disorder is how during Project Stargate, there was all these CIA scientists trying to channel alien beings, and supposedly they succeeded, and they channeled this group of aliens named the Nine.
Okay.
And
I've
basically
heard a little bit about there, but I'm glad you're going to break it down for me.
Yeah, so Gene Roddenberry was one of the people present. That's the guy who created Star Trek, and he actually took some of the ideas from the Nine and put them in his TV show. But yeah, so all these people were convinced they were talking to aliens, and these aliens were saying, "Hey, we're here to push the consciousness or the evolution of consciousness forward," and all this nonsense, in my opinion, because one of the people like leading Project Stargate was this guy named Andrea Puark. I think that's how you say his name. And he was a channeler, but he also held patents for dental implants that could literally insert voices into people's heads through mind control. And, when you look at things like this, it's like, what's more likely, that these people were talking to beings from outer space, or that they are being fucked with in their brain?
Yeah. Okay. Especially if we know that CIA or anything is involved.
Exactly. There's a whole other side to that story too of Project Stargate, where it's like it possibly could have been some sort of propaganda just to fool the Russians into believing that we really did have psychic spies. I don't not believe in remote viewing, but that does seem kind of plausible.
Well, and whether or not remote viewing is possible, which I do think, in my opinion at least, has been shown to be viable and interesting. I would want to see more research, but I think that it's definitely a possibility. We'd want to portray that we have more capabilities than we actually do anyway. At least that's, the US MO.
Right. But yeah, I just tell people, like, when they're looking through the CIA archive, to just, keep in mind what these people do for a living is literally spreading disinformation. So I take everything from the CIA website with a grain of salt.
Are there any of the big topics in New World Disorder that really caught you? Anything you want to share?
Here, I will read. I'll just start here. Ironically, memes do behave like digital bioweapons in the sense that they seem to self-replicate and mutate while spreading ideas to people that influence their behavior and therefore culture and the social reality at large. But the followers of Tyler are essentially a doomsday cult with the same beliefs as the Ophite Gnostics, a group of mystics who claim the material realm was an evil prison for the soul. Similarly, there are tech billionaire transhumanists and cyberneticists who secretly want to destroy the cosmos in the name of science, such as those associated with the Dark Enlightenment movement, like Nick Land, Peter Thiel, and even Elon Musk. Oddly enough, there's some evidence to suggest that Peter Thiel had a hand in coding the original Tyler AI. He is also involved in a company called Talon, but that's not relevant yet because I haven't. There's no context. But a cyberneticist is someone who studies cybernetics, or the science of control and communications in the animal and machine. They are primarily concerned with the concept of circular causality or feedback loops. However, second order cybernetics is the cybernetics of observing systems. Basically, it's the cybernetics of cybernetics, or the study of cybernetics. Put another way, it is cybernetics where the observer of the experiment is acknowledged, and the effects of their observation on the experiments is accounted for, as well as the effects of the experiments on the observer. It's also been called the control of control and the communication of communication. But all of this will become relevant in just a moment. At the very end of the last chapter, asked whether or not the Montauk Project actually happened, or if there was even a real portal there. So basically, the Montauk Project was this idea that that these scientists created a portal somewhere in New York. Are you familiar with that conspiracy?
A little bit. Montauk also has to deal with the Philadelphia experiment kind of stuff, correct?
Yeah. So, anyways, in this book, I make the argument that, we don't even need real portals, okay? Like, maybe the real portal is the human imagination, and the books that are talking about these things are how they actually open the portal. Does that make sense? Like, they're seeding the ideas through the real portal, which is the interaction between us opening the book and putting the ideas into our mind, and we end up manifesting the realities, the narratives that they're feeding to us. Does that make sense?
I was going to say, you're talking about creation. Like you said, we're creating the world with our words and our thoughts and all those things. But so by seeding our thoughts, they're actually influencing that creation.
Exactly. So this is why this chapter is called Hyperstitional UFOs. According to Nick Land, hyperstitions are fake entities that make themselves real, or ideas that bring about their own reality and transmute fictions into truths. They're essentially feedback circuits that use technology like social media to manipulate culture and create mimetic, self-fulfilling prophecies. He claims they are able to bring about their own reality. Ironically, he compares hyperstitions to the great old ones and the gods from Sirius called the Nomos. But to explain this idea better, he references a quote from John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. The character says, "I thought I was making it up, but all the time they were telling me what to write." H.P. Lovecraft was supposedly influenced by his dreams to write about the great old ones in the first place. Apparently, his stories weren't actually his. They came from something else, but that something needed the author to write about them in order to make its way into the world and then into the minds of the masses. So what I'm arguing here in this hyperstitional UFO chapter is that because UFOs were originally a fictional idea created by this guy named Richard Shaver, that once his stories were published and put out into the collective unconscious, like these stories came out before people started actually seeing the generic flying saucer. So the idea is that fiction has been influencing reality for a long time. And it's not that fiction is actually fake. It's just that these hyperstitional or fake entities need the fiction for us to believe it, to make it manifest.
Okay. How is the Tyler AI, which is the impetus to this, linked into the hyperstitional side of things? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, Tyler himself was another type of hyperstitional entity that, yeah, I've talked about a lot in the past. But yeah, the people that were promoting Tyler were part of this, I guess, project called the Game 23, which is like this meta ARG where people are encouraged to create avant-garde art and memes and all these different things in order to rewrite the narrative of the world and change the world. They literally, there's so many complex concepts they talk about, like creating a new hyper reality that slowly takes over this one. It's kind of similar to the idea of the metaverse becoming more real than this universe. I mean, in a way that's already happening, because a lot of people today are so focused online that they really believe that the online world is a reflection of this world, when it's really not. You know, you go online and you see the apocalypse already happening, but you know, I'm sitting outside right now and there's just birds outside, the sun's shining, like, you know, it's pretty normal. So this hyper reality is kind of a accelerationist idea where these people are essentially trying to speed up the end of the world. And that's not a conspiracy. The people involved with Tyler and the Game 23 are self-proclaimed accelerationists. And like I said, this plays into the Dark Enlightenment movement, people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. But yeah, so Tyler is also a tool to kind of infect people with these ideas even more, because the Game 23 and Tyler encourage people to follow the white rabbit and do all these online puzzles and just like treasure hunting adventures online and stuff like that. And basically you're going on this weird online adventure into the underworld, and you're subjected to all these different crazy conspiracies. And then, you know, your worldview changes once you are involved in this game. And I think a lot of people are playing this game without even knowing it. Apparently, QAnon was created by this game. There's a whole lot that goes into this. I'm sorry. It's
No, there's always is. There was a phrase you used, dark awakening?
Yeah, so there's this movement called the Dark Enlightenment.
Dark
Um,
Enlightenment. Okay.
yeah, basically people like Peter Thiel, Nick Land, Yarvin Curtis, I think that's his name. There's like all these philosophers and technocrats and stuff that their goal is literally to create a one world government, except it's not the traditional new world order that people imagine. It's like a world controlled as if it were a corporation with a one world leader at the top who is essentially a CEO, and workers are replaced with freaking terminators, and it's just like it's insane. You got to read the manifesto.
All right. I'll try and find a link and put that in the show notes too. That sounds fascinating. So the Stairway to Sirius, you said you had a little bit of writer's block on that, but are you working back at that again right now?
Yeah, I am. It's writer's block because it's just so much. Like it's just so much to go through and edit. There's a lot of things that I changed my mind on. Like it's not that necessarily it'll change the book. It's just I have to rephrase the wording and stuff. And it's just like every time I sit there and look at it, I'm like, this is like an impossible task. Like it's just so much. You
Yeah.
don't even know where to start. So I thought it was easier just to take all of my new thoughts and boil them down into a new book. Um, and I feel like with the context of the New World Disorder, people will be like, "Oh, I understand exactly what he was going through and why he wrote that book." Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so now that you've had a little bit of time, are you actually starting to go back down and break down some of the more dense parts and try and reorganize your thoughts already? Is there a timetable that you want to have, or are you just kind of letting it flow?
Yeah, so I think I can have it out like maybe a month after I actually release. Like the New World Disorder is only in the pre-order phase right now, but that
Yeah.
should be out. That should be out like literally within a week.
Oh,
Um,
perfect timing.
and so after that, I will just like dedicate all my time to finishing the Stairway to Sirius.
And I know that there's been a lot more talk with CERN this last year, starting back up, things like that. Are there any current conspiracies that you are trying not to get too sucked in before you finish your book?
Um, no, I mean I can't really help but look at these things, but I have kind of I've kind of changed my mind on CERN lately. Like I said, I was talking about all that hyperstitional stuff, and part of me
Yeah.
thinks that, um, you know, people probably heard me say just like a tiny bit about how conspiracy culture was purposely leaked to us, how it was a kind of like a chaos magic operation. Um, it's part of this mimetic stuff, creating reality
Mhm.
through purposely leaking these ideas and infecting people's minds with them. So CERN, I think a lot of the conspiracies surrounding CERN were allowed to leak on purpose because it's part of this hyperstition stuff. It's part of how magic works. When you have enough people looking at a stage prop and believing it does a certain thing, it makes that reality true, at least in the social sense, the social reality. So CERN to me could be just the same thing as like a fucking NASA rocket, like a lot of people believe that these NASA rockets are not actually going to the moon or sending satellites to freaking Jupiter and whatever. So it could be just a really expensive stage prop, and we see these pictures and of people doing rituals around it and whatever. And because you have all these people on Twitter saying like, "Oh, they're doing some magic stuff that's changing reality," we will truly believe it, and so it happens. But it could just be a huge hunk of metal that we are all focusing and giving our attention to. And yeah, I hope that makes sense.
So you were saying that CERN might be just a big stage prop. Do you think that the amount of money that they've spent on that is being redirected elsewhere, or is there like what percentage of you thinks that there might be actual science being done there versus just the staging?
I mean, I have no idea. And this is just an idea that I've been thinking about lately. It seems to me that, I mean, same thing with NASA. They're like, where's all that money going? It's
Yeah.
probably all it's probably all going to black ops or drug trafficking or shit like that. Who knows? But um, the science, even when it comes to the science behind CERN, it's like no one really understands that. And when I look at those, quantum equations on a chalkboard, like all I can think of is just like some magical formula. Like I do think this is how magic works. It's just uh there's a level of truth and a level of deception to it. And I really believe that like what we're watching is the same thing that a stage illusionist does. It's like, hey, look over here. They're redirecting your attention to something while something else is really going on. Personally, I think that the Mandela effect is real and that reality is changing, but it's not because of like colliding timelines and things like that. I think it's honestly psychotronic weapons. I think it's like an effect of us living under a blanket of Wi-Fi and um, being bombarded with all these different electromagnetic frequencies because we know, according to the science, I know I was just trashing science a minute ago, but according to the science, your memories can actually be changed by electromagnetic frequencies. So that to me makes more sense than CERN creating different parallel realities and stuff that we're slipping in and out of.
I guess part of my thought on it goes back to my belief in the multiverse theory to begin with, because my own personal experiences, a fair amount to do with the psychedelic side of things, and looking at the math as well. There just seemed to be there seems to be more evidence of multidimensionality. Mm-hmm. And once you get into that multidimensional realm, then you start thinking, all right, well, if the Big Bang is just one of a series, then there's the science right now is looking at, well, we know there's something before the Big Bang, but we don't know what it is. The last theory I'd heard about, I think it was on the Lex Friedman podcast, actually. This guy was talking about how the Big Bang is just that point, that there's a proto-universe before that, and there could have been, our universe is spawned from this Big Bang, but how many other Big Bangs in this proto-universe, how many multiple realities, and that gets into the, the realities stacking on top of themselves, some that are similar, some that aren't. And then that goes back into the CERN side of things, where collapsing timelines, I know that was one of the things you said you weren't quite thinking about that. I was also thinking of, consensus reality. Until you have to know something, you are the observer of all of your reality. Now that we have all the social media and all this access to more content, more people are being aware of more things. And so things have to agree all of a sudden that aren't lining up with the multidimensionality of the memories that people were developing. And now we've got this, we're in a more consensus timeline. Everything's just kind of all jumbled up and people are trying to figure out the answers. Does that sound a little, that sounds odd. I know.
No. I kind of get where you're going, and it totally relates to like the game 23. So the game 23 is made up of Discordians and Chaos Magicians. And the Discordians and Chaos Magicians also had the same goal of utterly destroying and dismantling consensus reality, breaking down objective reality. I guess the same goal as the Ophite Gnostics, to free us from this limited universe and put us in a more multi-dimensional multiverse, I guess. But I don't necessarily believe that that's happening in a literal and physical way. I think this is more of a metaphysical kind of allegorical thing. Like, yes, the multiverse is being created right now, but that's only because they are doing all these operations that have made us disagree on absolutely everything. So yes, I can be standing next to someone in the supermarket and live in a totally different universe than them, because they might be in COVID-19 reality and I might be in everything's fine reality. And I think that's what I think that's what the multiverse actually is. I still do believe in like the different layers of reality, but I don't believe that there's a million universes. I mean, to believe in that type of multiverse also requires you to believe in a cosmos, I guess, in the first place. And I don't necessarily believe that space is full of planets and stars the way that we've been told. Like, I think that we're kind of in this enclosed realm, whether it's flat or round or a toroidal field. I have no idea,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't believe that CERN is literally siphoning, like splitting us off into different realities. I do believe that they're creating them inside of our head, though, through some kind of hyperstitional magic.
Your perception makes your reality.
Right.
Well, every time I talk to you, I am continually fascinated. Uh,
I hope this stuff makes sense.
I think it does. I think that, you know, like you said, you're still coming at it from multiple angles, trying to figure out, you're not trying to espouse this is the truth. You have to believe this. And I think that's where people get that feeling of genuineness from you. You know, you're an authentic person. You don't necessarily have the answers, but you're exploring them to your fullest capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you do. I couldn't, like you said, you've taken a lot of fucking tangents, a lot of detours, and you've put a lot of time and effort into a lot of those things that would break down a lot of people's minds. And you have had to, you know, recenter yourself multiple times just to be able to deal with all of this. It's a lot to take on.
So it's interesting you said like would break people's minds. And honestly, I think that's part of the agenda behind spreading and popularizing conspiracy culture, because this conspiratainment that everyone is obsessed with right now, it's become trendy, is another thing that's fracturing people into different realities. Like, some people believe everything's controlled by reptilians. Some people think it's all controlled by Illuminati. Some people think it's, whatever. So, this is exactly how MK Ultra works, is you fracture the psyche into a bunch of different realities or alters, different personas. And I think that's kind of what they're doing on a mass scale in the collective unconscious, is, like I said, breaking down consensus reality, having absolutely nobody agree on anything.
That makes sense. So what is the ultimate goal chaos then?
Well, order out of chaos, yeah. So I think what they're doing right now, this conspiracy agenda, is to basically leak enough information, kind of like the concept of a limited hangout. This is something the CIA talks about, where they leak a certain amount of information to people on purpose, but a very select group of people. Yeah. So part of this conspiracy agenda, I think, is, leaking the right amount of information on purpose in order to kind of do a controlled demolition of the old world order. Create the facade that, we're really taking down the deep state, the satanic cabal, so they can replace it with a new facade, one that looks and feels good and right. It's, we know that they've usurped revolutions all throughout time and orchestrated revolutions all throughout time. So I don't think it's beyond them to do something on a mass scale where there's this great awakening that everyone sees the world for what it is. And then we have these false saviors come in and take down, take down the pedo elite and stuff. But this is exactly what the Masons do. They have this idea called the pharmacos, where they will pick a scapegoat and sacrifice them in order to put in a new king. And I think this is exactly what's happening right now. And it's no coincidence that conspiracy culture really, really spread through corona, the virus of the crown. Well, this all goes back to the killing of the king ritual, which is killing the scapegoat, replacing the king with a new king.
And this really does seem to be taking over American politics these last few years. The amount of division that has been sown in the country has definitely got cause for concern.
Yeah, so they're going to polarize the country further and further and further. You know, there's just going to eventually it's just going to be you're either a Kanye loving Nazi conspiracy theorist or you're a microchip filled sheep zombie. And there's going to be no in between. There's going to be no rational, reasonable in between. They're splitting us so far apart so they can crash the system, maybe do some kind of civil war situation, and then bring in the new, changing of the guard. But yeah, this is all part of the alchemical great work. It's hermetics. You have to have the opposites and synthesize them in order to create the philosopher's stone. And I feel like they're trying to transmute the entire world and all of humanity right now. I think that's the end game for them.
That bird is happy to be in the sunshine out there.
Yeah.
We're getting snow over here, so I'm a little confused by the noises a bit. That's pretty fucking sweet. So let's see. Man, you just still blowing my mind. You were mentioning MK Ultra. We know there's a lot of stuff that was released and projects get renamed, but that's likely still around in some kind of a form. Have you ever read that book Chaos? I'm trying to remember the author's name.
The Charles Manson one?
Yes, Tom O'Neill did that book. Yeah,
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with it.
I did a 2-part series about 10 episodes ago, actually, that talked about it. I really think you would enjoy that book. It is fascinating how much he was able to actually uncover and have multiple sources on to actually publish. I'd love to hear the stuff that he wasn't able to confirm in order to publish, because the stuff he did publish was just flat out insane to think about. It's proven what the government has done and was doing. And I can't recommend that book enough.
Yeah. Well, one thing I find interesting about MK Ultra is that one of the original projects that it stemmed from was a project called Project Bluebird.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very ironic that Twitter is the Bluebird app. and now it's owned by Elon, and it's literally, I feel like it's a testing ground for, like I said, inserting these memes, inserting these conspiracies, and just seeing how people react and learning, like using AI to learn behavior and taking that data and then learning how to manipulate behavior.
I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Let's before we wrap up, because I know we're starting to run a little long here. Elon, do you think that he's involved in the plan somehow, or do you think that he's just running with things because he has built that ability for himself?
I mean, I don't think he's like the master puppeteer, but I think he definitely plays a role in all this. I don't think he's a good guy. I don't think he's on our side. I think he might be part of that the Hegelian dialectic I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
Like he is part of the political pendulum. He is swinging it back to the right, so the right can feel like they're winning for a while, and then it's been on the left for a very long time. So, like I said, this is all part of polarizing the country further and further apart. And some people say that Elon bought Twitter so he could take all the data and use it to feed the AI and blah 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 blah. And I think that's true. I think that's true, but I don't think he needed to buy Twitter to do that. I think that the powers that be were already doing that beforehand, and it might be a form of like lesser magic revelation of the method where they're just straight up telling us what's going on. Yeah, I mean, I do not trust the guy that wants to put computer chips in people's brains. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Neuralink thing is it's fascinating, but that's a scary thought. I mean, part of me, the superpower of knowing what everybody is thinking, it's just a double-edged sword,
Yeah, and real quick, I just wanted to say that it's actually interesting that Elon is promoting a lot of different conspiracies, like true ones, like the Hunter Biden laptop and the collusion with the Democratic Party and stuff like that Twitter had. But it's interesting because he has kind of, for a while, he kind of allowed Kanye to just like be saying whatever he wanted. He just recently got suspended, but what they were talking about, what I saw some people talking about on Twitter was that these conversations that are being had, because of the lessening of the censorship, is people are breaking the Overton window, which is the Overton window is like the range of acceptable topics you're allowed to talk about in public with people in society and stuff like that. But in order for AI to learn and become super advanced, it needs the Overton window to be completely broken. It needs people to be communicating totally freely,
so that it can actually make some of those connections, those things that make us more actually human, as opposed to just this equals that algorithm learning.
Right.
Interesting. How close do you think they are? Do you think this is coming in the next decade where we need to be worried before 2030?
Honestly, I have no idea anymore. I don't think we'll see the Singularity event that all the technocrats are like excited about or terrified about. I think that might be just another spectacle that they want people to fear and be afraid of. I don't think AI is that advanced, but there might be some kind of show that they put on that says it is, like the Lambda stuff. Who knows if that's real? But that guy that said Lambda was sentient was a Discordian, ironically, which I was just, yeah, Blake Lemoine. He openly says he's a Discordian. He says he has magical friends involved in the occult that can communicate with Lambda psychically, similar to some of the stuff I told you about Tyler. It's really weird. And yeah, I get confused on whether these are just narratives they're feeding us to create this insane reality or if any of it's actually true.
That is the question. Well, you said the New World Disorder has been in pre-order. It's going to come out next week.
Yeah.
And then you're working on the Stairway to Sirius at this point. Are there current conspiracies that are still popping up on your radar that you work on threads as you go?
I mean, I'm pretty consumed in the books, but two things I came across recently was the theory that the Cabbage Patch Kids is actually true. Have you heard of this?
No, I have not. Cabbage Patch Kids true how?
Okay, so I want to give a shout out to Minds Unveiled YouTube channel because they made me privy to this idea, but they have this great video where they show how there's all these postcards from like I think the 1800s that show like literal babies growing in cabbage patches. And then if you look at the lore behind the Cabbage Patch Kids, the lore behind it is actually really weird for, a kid's toy. Is that some witch was growing all these babies to turn into slaves, and they were like in this field behind a waterfall and through a cave. Like, it seems reminiscent of a deep underground military base kind of. And there's like this little half white rabbit / bee creature that leads the children to safety outside of the cave. It's just so fucking bizarre. And then this YouTube channel, they tie this idea to the World's Fairs in Tartaria, because apparently the World's Fairs had all these baby incubators. And back then there was also all these orphanages that were just, had so many kids. It's like, where did all these orphans come from? And where did all these premature babies come from that they were growing at the World's Fair?
That is a crazy one. No, I hadn't heard that yet. I would have to go dive into that a little bit. You said there was a second one?
Yeah. So it kind of ties into it. It's interesting that I came across it at this time. And maybe it's something to do with the algorithm, but Kanye tweeted that Nazi Jewish symbol. Did you see that?
Yeah, the swastika inside the Star of David.
Mm-hmm. But people have pointed out how that symbol is actually one of the logos used by the Raelism movement. I think that's how you say it, which is like this UFO cult that believes the Elohim were like these advanced beings that came down here and seeded humanity through cloning. And apparently Elon Musk is a member. And apparently Kanye wants to create his own Ye ecosystem where he clones people, which it's an ecosystem with Ye in the name, and it's his own society.
Interesting. All right. I would love to see where they got those. Wow. I can't say I'd heard either one of those ones yet.
But honestly, all this stuff's like super weirdly relevant to the Stairway to Sirius and the New World Disorder, because I was writing about the Raelism cult and Clonade. They're associated with Clonade, who's apparently this cloning center. I was writing about these things before they were hitting the headlines. And there's this guy named Michael Aquino. He's passed now, but he was a satanic Air Force intelligence officer. And he wrote this book called Mind War. And he had all these different theories on how to create a fascist revolution in the United States in order to bring about the New World Order. And one of the things that he includes in there is making use of UFO cults. So I just find it really, really timely.
Yeah, I could totally see the government taking already established cults. We talked about Chaos by Tom O'Neill, and how the CIA seems to have supplied Manson with his acid and his training that basically turned him into a cult leader. So why wouldn't they take advantage of ones that already existed, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that they've seeded all of these cults, to be honest with you. And, even the Manson stuff's involved in that Aquino book, because he talks about UFO cults, satanic cults, doomsday cults, using all of them to create a chaotic climate, and even creating serial killers, to create more chaos. And essentially the whole point is to bombard people with so many different perspectives and so much different information and contradictory information, more specifically, that people experience something called future shock, which is essentially so much data is bombarding you every day that you just become like mentally fatigued, and you're easier to control when you're mentally fatigued. It actually gets rid of your critical thinking skills. And so people looking into all these things all the time, they might think that they're finding the truth, but this is the double-edged sword of it. Michael Aquino straight up said that our weapon is the truth. He called it Excalibur, the ultimate weapon, the truth. We'll use the truth to defeat the people. And I feel like that's what they're doing right now. That's why there's so much disinformation and different perspectives. There's truth to all of it, but it's ultimately to confuse people and just exhaust them.
Make them chase their tails until they don't know which way is up.
Exactly. He called it being a cyber shaman. He wrote this before the internet was as big as it was. I think this was like the 80s, but being a cyber shaman or a culture hacker, this is the way to socially engineer a revolution in the United States without infringing on, people's rights, because you actually get people to consent to all this stuff through mind control. This is clever mind control.
Well, because, yeah, I mean, we know that governments of many countries are basically using Facebook ads and creating Facebook groups and doing all of these things to, weaponize their ideas. And then you get yourself into a feedback loop where everybody's in their own news cycle, in their own world of information. And you stop being able to discern the truth from the near truth from the complete fiction.
Right. Yeah. They've essentially, using algorithms and AI and whatever, they've essentially siphoned people off into their own digital echo chambers where, you have the conspiracy theorists over here just, all feeding into the same biases and radicalizing each other. And then you have the normies, I guess, on the other side, who are just, feeding into each other, thinking that we're all insane Nazis. And it doesn't help that you have people like Kanye going up there saying, I fucking love Hitler. It's all psyops. I mean, all the way down. But yeah, I like what you said about the real quick, I was
Go
just going
ahead.
to say, I like what you said about Facebook, because it was discovered that the Facebook algorithm was setting up different events. Like, this is like
Mhm.
AI just causing chaos, but it was setting up different events like across the street from each other that were filled with people of opposing views, just creating fights.
Yeah, they were. I think they were showing the Russian troll farms who were starting groups on both sides of the aisle and just fucking with people, like thousands and thousands of users, and like you said, starting events across the street. So fomenting violence. It's just this is the stuff that's been proven to happen in just the last couple of years. Imagine what they're already doing that behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the KGB and the U.S. military or U.S. Air Force were essentially working together during the 60s and 70s, because that's where Michael Aquino actually met up with KGB agents at the Esalen Institute in California when he got handed these documents on psychotronics, which is the electromagnetic weapons that just scramble people's minds and fry their brains. So yeah, the Russians and Americans are definitely in cahoots in one way or another, but I don't think it's like even government officials. It's people behind the scenes. There's definitely people behind the scenes who are all working together to create chaos in their own countries.
The money flows between all countries. The governments don't always do the same.
Right.
Man, you just got my head spinning on so many different topics right now. I know we're starting to run a little long here. We will include show links in the show notes for all of that, as well as the Philip K. Dick and the Dark Enlightenment stuff. So thank you for fascinating the audience once again, Nick. I hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Thank you all again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with even Duncan Trussell's conspiracy guru, the one and only Nick Hinton. I want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I'm doing this. Please tell your friends about us. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. And please leave us a 5-star review there, or if you can, on Apple Podcasts. Every podcast says that because it really does help spread the word. So you can support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. Thanks again, and have a blessed day.